The doorbell rang on the coldest December morning I'd ever known. My son Aaron stood there with his wife Claire, their newborn twins bundled against the frost. "Mom," he said, his breath fogging between us, "we need you. Please move in with us. Claire can't handle both babies alone." My heart, frozen since my husband died 6 months earlier, suddenly thawed. Finally, a purpose. Finally, family again. I sold my little house within 3 weeks, packed my late husband's photos into boxes, and drove through a snowstorm to their countryside home. When Claire opened the door, she smiled, but her eyes stayed cold as the wind behind me. "Welcome," she said, the words sharp as icicles. I should have recognized that look. I should have turned around right then and driven back to my empty house before the sale closed. But hope makes you blind, and I desperately needed to believe my son still loved me. That was my first mistake. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The house was beautiful in that carefully staged way that spoke of Claire's Instagram aesthetic rather than actual warmth. Everything was gray and white and perfectly arranged, like a magazine spread where real people weren't supposed to actually live. My bedroom was at the far end of the hallway, separated from theirs by the twins' nursery and a bathroom. "We thought you'd appreciate the privacy," Claire said, though the words sounded more like isolation. That first night, I unpacked my husband's photo and set it on the nightstand. Thomas smiled back at me from behind the glass. "Forever 58, forever healthy, forever mine." "I hope I made the right choice," I whispered to him. The house settled around me with creaks and groans, and somewhere down the hall, one of the twins began to cry. I started to rise, but heard Claire's footsteps moving quickly toward the nursery. Her voice drifted back, sharp and territorial. "I've got them, Helen. You should rest." Rest felt like another word for stay away. I lay back down and stared at the ceiling, listening to my family exist without me. The small slights began immediately, so subtle I convinced myself I was imagining things. Claire would make breakfast for 3, then look surprised when I appeared in the kitchen. "Oh, I thought you'd already eaten," she'd say, though it was barely 7 in the morning. Family photos appeared on the mantel daily, carefully curated shots of Aaron, Claire, and the twins in matching outfits. I wasn't in a single one. When I mentioned it gently, Aaron laughed it off. "You're always so camera shy, Mom. We didn't want to make you uncomfortable." But I'd never been camera shy. I'd been cropped out. During dinner conversations, Claire would interrupt me mid-sentence to show Aaron something on her phone, or suddenly remember something urgent in another room. He'd follow her like a man on a leash, leaving me alone at the table with my half-finished stories hanging in the air. One evening, I heard them whispering in their bedroom, the door not quite closed. "You need to set boundaries with her," Claire hissed. "She acts like she owns the place." "She's just trying to help," Aaron replied weakly. "She's smothering us." The chore list appeared on my bedroom door exactly 1 week after I'd arrived, typed in cheerful font and printed on expensive cardstock. "Daily schedule for Helen," it read, followed by bullet points that made my stomach clench. "Feed twins at 6 a.m., change diapers throughout the day, do all laundry including bedding, clean kitchen after every meal, vacuum entire house, shovel driveway and walkways when it snows, prepare dinner by 5:30 p.m. At the bottom, Claire had drawn a little heart and signed her name with a flourish. I stared at it for a long moment, my nursing training kicking in automatically to assess what I was seeing. This wasn't a helpful schedule. This was a job description for an unpaid servant. When I brought it up at breakfast, Aaron kissed Claire's cheek and said, "Thanks for organizing that, babe. Mom, you're such a help to us. We really appreciate everything you do." The word help had once sounded kind and generous. Now it felt like a collar tightening around my neck. I forced a smile and nodded, because what else could I do? I'd sold my house. I had nowhere else to go. Winter settled into the house like an unwelcome guest that wouldn't leave. Despite the constantly running heater and the fireplace burning every evening, I felt cold all the time. It was the kind of cold that starts in your bones and spreads outward, the kind that no amount of blankets can touch because it's not really about temperature at all. I'd catch Claire watching me sometimes, her reflection appearing suddenly in hallway mirrors or the dark kitchen windows at night. Her expression was unreadable, but it made my skin prickle with unease. She studied me the way you'd study an insect you were planning to crush, calculating and patient. The only warmth I found was with the twins. Little Marcus and Maya, barely 3 months old, with their father's dark hair and their grandmother's gray eyes. They'd reach for me with those tiny starfish hands, and something in my chest would crack open with love. When I sang to them, old lullabies Thomas used to hum while doing dishes, they'd stop fussing and stare at me with such perfect trust. Their laughter kept me alive during those frozen weeks. The family dinner happened on a Tuesday evening, everyone seated around Claire's expensive farmhouse table like we were posing for another one of her perfect photos. She'd made roast chicken with rosemary potatoes, and the smell should have been comforting, but my stomach was tight with anxiety I couldn't name. We ate in near silence, the only sounds the scrape of forks on plates and the baby monitor crackling with the twins' peaceful breathing. Then Claire set down her wine glass and smiled at me across the table. "Helen, I've been thinking. You must miss your old friends from your neighborhood. Maybe you should visit them more often. Give yourself some time away from all this chaos." She gestured vaguely at the house, as if caring for my own grandchildren was some terrible burden I'd taken on. Aaron nodded without looking up from his plate. "Yeah, Mom. You should get out more. It's not healthy to be cooped up here all the time." I laughed awkwardly, thinking this must be some kind of joke. It wasn't. Claire reached into her cardigan pocket and slid a business card across the table toward me. "Melissa Hoffman, Senior Living Specialist." The silent weekend came without warning. I woke up on Saturday morning to find a note on the kitchen counter, Claire's handwriting looping across expensive stationery. "Gone for a quick getaway. Back Sunday night. The twins are with Aaron's mom. Help yourself to anything in the fridge." I stood there holding the note, reading it 3 times before my brain would accept what my eyes were seeing. The twins are with Aaron's mom. But I was Aaron's mom. I was the only mother Aaron had ever had, the woman who'd sat up with him through colic and chickenpox, who'd taught him to read and ride a bike and treat people with kindness. Except he'd learned that last lesson wrong, apparently. I checked my phone with shaking hands. One text from Claire, sent at 5 a.m. "Just a couple's weekend. You understand. Enjoy the peace and quiet." No explanation of where they'd taken my grandchildren. No phone number for this mysterious other grandmother who didn't exist. Just casual cruelty delivered through a screen, designed to remind me of my place in their hierarchy. I spent that weekend alone in their big, cold house, surrounded by family photos I wasn't in. When they returned Sunday night, I was waiting in the living room, my hands folded in my lap, like I was preparing for a job interview I knew I'd fail. Aaron carried both twins inside, and I watched as Claire took Maya from his arms without even glancing in my direction. Finally, I found my voice. "Aaron, we need to talk." He sighed, the sound heavy with irritation, and set Marcus's car seat down by the door. "Mom, can this wait? We just drove 4 hours and the babies need to be fed." "No, it can't wait. You've changed. This whole situation has changed. You're treating me like hired help instead of your mother." Claire made a small sound from the kitchen, something between a laugh and a scoff. Aaron's jaw tightened, and I watched my gentle boy transform into someone I didn't recognize. "Mom, you make Claire uncomfortable. You act like this is your house, like you have some right to be part of every decision we make. But you don't. This is our family, our home, our life." Each word hit like a slap. My throat burned with tears I refused to shed in front of them. His next words broke something inside me. "We needed a babysitter, Mom, not a third parent." The snowstorm arrived exactly 1 week later, announced by weather reports that made everyone in the county stock up on bread and milk like the world was ending. By Thursday evening, snow was falling so thick you couldn't see the road from the front windows. It was the heaviest snowfall in 15 years, the reporters said, as if we needed confirmation of what we could see with our own eyes. I was feeding Maya her bottle when Claire appeared in the nursery doorway. Her smile was syrupy sweet, the kind that made my shoulders tense automatically. "Helen, I hate to ask, but we're almost out of firewood. Would you mind bringing some in from the shed? My back's been killing me all day." I glanced toward the window, where snow swirled like angry ghosts against the darkening sky. My knees weren't what they used to be, arthritis making every step painful on the best days. "Maybe Aaron could do it when he gets home from the store?" I suggested carefully. "He won't be back for at least an hour, and we really need it now. Please." That word, so polite and poisonous. I set Maya in her crib and bundled up in my winter coat. The wind hit me the moment I stepped outside, stealing my breath. Behind me, I heard the door shut with a soft, final click. I dropped the firewood and grabbed the handle with both hands, pulling hard enough that pain shot through my arthritic fingers. Still locked. I pounded on the door, each impact sending shocks up my frozen arms. Aaron, Claire. The door's locked. My voice disappeared into the wind, swallowed by the storm that seemed to be getting worse by the second. Through the frosted window beside the door, I saw movement in the living room. Someone was standing there, close enough that I could make out the shape of a person, but not their features through the ice-covered glass. Hope surged through me. Thank God. Please, open the door. The figure moved closer to the window, and for just a moment, the frost cleared enough that I could see her face. Claire. We locked eyes through the glass, and I watched her expression shift from surprise to something else, something cold and calculated that made my blood freeze worse than any temperature could. I pressed my palm against the window, pleading silently. She stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. Then she reached up, her hand moving in slow motion, and pulled the curtain cord. The heavy drapes swept closed, cutting off my view. In that single motion, my family transformed into strangers. I don't remember much after that. My brain has mercifully blurred the worst parts, leaving only fragments like broken glass. I remember sliding down against the door, my legs refusing to hold me anymore. I remember thinking about Thomas and wondering if dying in the snow would hurt as much as watching him slip away in that hospital bed. I remember the cold stopping its burn and becoming something almost comfortable, which some distant part of my nursing training recognized as a very bad sign. And I remember crawling. I have no idea how long I was out there or how far I made it. The next clear memory is waking up in a hospital room, harsh fluorescent lights burning my eyes, tubes in my arm feeding me warmth I couldn't generate myself. A nurse with kind eyes was checking my vitals. You're awake. That's wonderful. You're incredibly lucky, Mrs. Ward. The neighbor found you at the end of your driveway and called for help. My son, I whispered, my throat raw. Is Aaron here? Her expression shifted to professional sympathy. No family has come yet. I'm sure they're on their way. But they weren't. 3 hours passed before anyone showed up. Aaron finally appeared on day 2 of my hospital stay, slipping into my room like a thief who'd been caught. His face was tight with guilt, but not the kind that leads to real change, just the uncomfortable awareness that he'd been caught doing something wrong. Mom. God. I'm so glad you're okay. He pulled a chair close to my bed, but didn't reach for my hand. It was an accident. The lock jammed sometimes in cold weather. We didn't know you were stuck out there. I looked at him for a long moment. This man I'd carried inside my body, nursed through midnight fevers, loved more than my own life for 34 years. Where's Claire? The question came out flat, emotionless. In the car. She's upset about everything that happened. She feels terrible. I'm sure she does. My voice was steady now, stronger. Aaron. I saw her close the curtains. I saw her face when she looked at me through that window, and then she walked away. His face went pale. That's not. You were confused from the cold. Claire wouldn't. Your wife locked me outside in a snowstorm and closed the curtains when I begged to be let in. He chose wrong. We still love you, Mom. I smiled faintly. Of course you do, dear. That's why you left me to die. The discharge papers came on day 3. The doctor wanted me to stay longer, but insurance had other ideas, and I was ready to leave anyway. I needed space to think, to plan, to become someone other than the grateful victim everyone expected. Aaron and Claire arrived to pick me up, pulling up to the hospital entrance in their expensive SUV like dutiful family members playing their roles. I could see them through the automatic doors, Claire checking her makeup in the visor mirror while Aaron drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. The nurse wheeling me out smiled at them. Your family's here. That must be such a relief. They're not my family, I said quietly. They're people I used to know. Before she could respond, I stood up from the wheelchair and walked past the SUV without glancing at it. My legs were shaky but functional, my determination stronger than my body's weakness. Mom, what are you doing? Aaron called after me, his door hanging open. Where are you going? I kept walking toward the taxi stand, my small hospital bag clutched in my stiff fingers. I'm making my own arrangements. Don't worry about me anymore. I climbed into the first taxi and gave the driver an address I'd memorized from the hospital's resource guide. A women's shelter that helped domestic abuse survivors start over. The women's shelter gave me a small room with a twin bed and a shared bathroom down the hall. It wasn't much, But it was mine, paid for with emergency assistance while I figured out my next steps. Those steps started with remembering something Aaron had forgotten in his rush to turn his home into a fortress against his own mother. 3 years ago, right after the twins were born, he'd installed security cameras throughout the house. For safety, he'd said, so we can check on things when we're away. He'd shown me how to access the system using an app on his old laptop, the one he'd given me when he upgraded. That laptop was still in the shelter's storage room where I'd checked my few belongings. My hands shook as I logged into the security system, half expecting the passwords to have changed. They hadn't. People are careless when they think they've already won. I scrolled through the footage from that Thursday evening, watching myself bundle up in Thomas's scarf, watching Claire ask me to get the firewood with that sweet, poisonous smile. And then I watched what happened after the door closed behind me. Claire walked to the window. She saw me pounding. She watched me for 15 seconds, calm and considering. Then she pulled those curtains closed. The lawyer's office was small but professional, tucked into a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. Lewis Patterson had been recommended by the shelter's advocate, a gruff man in his 60s who specialized in helping people with no money fight people with plenty of it. I showed him the video footage without preamble. His expression stayed neutral through the first viewing, but I saw his jaw tighten when Claire closed those curtains. He watched it again, then a third time, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Mrs. Ward, this isn't just abuse. This is attempted homicide by criminal neglect. Your daughter-in-law watched you suffer and made a conscious choice to do nothing while you were in immediate danger. In Washington state, that's a felony. The word hung in the air between us. Felony. Prison time. The complete destruction of their perfect little life. Do you want to press charges? Lewis asked, his pen poised over the pad. I thought about it, really thought about it. About Claire in an orange jumpsuit, about Aaron losing his job and his reputation, about my grandchildren growing up with their mother in prison. No, I said finally. Lewis's eyebrows rose in surprise. Mrs. Ward, with this evidence, punishment is sweetest when they never see it coming. The return happened exactly 2 weeks after my hospital discharge. I showed up at their door on a Sunday afternoon, carrying a gift basket from the expensive grocery store downtown, filled with gourmet cookies and fancy coffee beans they'd never buy for themselves. When Aaron opened the door, his face cycled through shock, relief, and something that might have been genuine happiness before settling on cautious welcome. Mom, wow, this is a surprise. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I said, keeping my voice soft and trembling slightly, like I was barely holding myself together. About family and forgiveness and how short life is. I don't want us to be angry anymore. Claire appeared behind him, Maya balanced on her hip. Her surprise was almost comical, her carefully maintained mask of control slipping for just a moment. Helen, you're forgiving us. I'm trying to, I said, letting tears gather in my eyes. It wasn't hard. Thinking about everything they'd done made crying easy. You're my family. My only family. And those babies need their grandmother. I watched Claire's expression shift as she calculated this new development. Having me angry and independent was dangerous. Having me broken and grateful was useful. She made her decision quickly. Come in. Please. Let's have coffee. My forgiveness was performance art. But their downfall would be very, very real. 3 days later, I made my move. I'd love to babysit the twins. I offered at dinner, keeping my voice casual and hopeful. Give you two some time alone together. You've been working so hard. You deserve a proper date night. Claire's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. Time without the babies meant time to pretend they were still the carefree couple from their engagement photos, not exhausted parents drowning in responsibility. Would you really? That would be amazing. Of course. You're my family. The lie tasted bitter, but necessary. That Saturday evening, they dressed up like people who remembered what romance looked like and drove off toward town, leaving me alone with Marcus and Maya for the first time since the snowstorm. I waited until their car disappeared down the driveway before I started working. The twins were angels, sleeping peacefully in their cribs while I moved through the house with methodical purpose. I knew Aaron and Claire kept important documents in the home office, filed away in what they probably thought was secure organization. Claire's laptop was password protected, but I'd watched her type it enough times to know it was Maya 2023, lacking any imagination or security awareness. Their financial files opened like flowers in sunlight, revealing everything they'd kept hidden. And there, buried in a folder labeled Family Trust, was something that changed everything. The inheritance fund had been Thomas's pride, his final act of love for family he'd never meet. He'd worked overtime for years, skipped vacations, driven an old truck that barely ran. Also, his grandchildren would have opportunities we'd never had. Education is freedom, he'd always said. And I'm going to make sure they're free. I stared at the bank statements showing his careful deposits. 10,000 here, 5,000 there, growing over 15 years into a nest egg that should have been untouchable. The account had been set up as a trust with me as primary trustee and Aaron as successor trustee in case something happened to me. Somehow, Aaron had gotten himself named as co-trustee 3 years ago, right after Thomas's diagnosis, when I'd been too grief-stricken to pay attention to paperwork. That access had given him the keys to steal from his own children's future. The transfers started small, $2,000 to cover unexpected bills, then $5,000 for home repairs, then bigger and bigger amounts as Claire's spending spiraled. By the time I was reviewing the statements, the account that should have held $96,000 had only $16,000 left. They'd spent $80,000 on designer handbags and failed investments, while planning to put me in a nursing home. I copied every file onto USB drives. Monday morning, I made 3 anonymous phone calls from a burner phone I'd bought with cash at a convenience store. The first was to the IRS, reporting suspected tax fraud and unreported income tied to Aaron and Claire's social security numbers. I provided dates and rough amounts, enough to trigger an audit without revealing how I knew the information. The second call went to their mortgage company, alerting them to suspicious activity and potential fraud in the loan application. Claire had claimed to be a freelance consultant making $70,000 per year, but her actual income was closer to $20,000 from her part-time social media management. That was mortgage fraud, a federal crime. The third call was hardest, because it wasn't anonymous. I called Child Protective Services and reported my concerns about the children's safety in a home where I'd been deliberately locked outside to die while the babies were present. The caseworker took detailed notes, asked careful questions, and promised to investigate. "We take these reports seriously," she said. "Thank you for caring about those children's welfare." Then I sent carefully compiled evidence packages to 3 different places: their homeowner's insurance company, Aaron's employer, and Lewis Patterson, my lawyer, with instructions to hold everything for leverage if needed. Within 2 weeks, their perfect little life began to crumble. The twins' first birthday party happened in March, 3 months after the snowstorm that had nearly killed me. I attended with a store-bought cake and a carefully neutral smile, playing the role of gracious grandmother who'd forgiven everything. The house was decorated with pastel balloons and a banner that said, "Marcus and Maya, turn 1," in glittering letters. Claire had invited her parents, her sister, some neighborhood couples who probably felt obligated to attend. Everyone ate cake and cooed over the babies while I stood in the corner, taking photos they'd never asked to see. But I wasn't watching the twins. I was watching Aaron and Claire. The cracks were starting to show in their perfect facade. Claire's smile looked brittle, her laugh too loud and forced. She'd lost weight in an unhealthy way, her collarbones sharp beneath her expensive sweater. Aaron looked exhausted, gray circles under his eyes, his shoulders hunched like a man carrying weight he couldn't quite manage. I caught fragments of whispered conversations. "The audit is just routine," Aaron told Claire's father. "Nothing to worry about. We're refinancing," Claire explained to her sister. "Better interest rates." Lies, both of them. The IRS investigation was expanding. Their mortgage company had flagged their account for review. The house that once glowed with their self-satisfaction now looked hollow and desperate. Aaron showed up at my shelter room on a Tuesday evening in late March, his appearance so disheveled and desperate that the security guard almost didn't let him in. His clothes were rumpled, his hair uncombed, his eyes red-rimmed and wild. "Did you do this?" he demanded the moment I opened the door, not even bothering with a greeting. "Did you report us to the IRS? To Child Services? To the mortgage company?" I stepped back to let him in, my expression carefully neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about, Aaron. What's happened? Everything is falling apart." He paced my tiny room like a caged animal. "They're auditing us. They're investigating the mortgage. Claire's parents are threatening to sue us for grandparents' rights. My boss is reviewing my computer activity. It's like someone planned this, like someone is systematically destroying our lives. That sounds terrible, I said softly, sitting down on my narrow bed. How can I help? He stopped pacing and stared at me. Help? After everything that happened between us, you'd help? You're my son. Of course I'd help. If I could. The lie came easier each time. He collapsed into the room's single chair and put his face in his hands. Aaron, I said quietly, do you remember what you did? His silence told me everything. He remembered. The police cars arrived at their house on a bright April morning, their lights flashing against the pale suburban houses like an obscene disco. Neighbors came out to their porches to watch as officers knocked on Aaron and Claire's door, search warrant in hand. The fraud investigation had gone public. Claire's fake income claims, Aaron's embezzlement from the trust fund, their web of lies about assets and income. Everything was being laid bare for their entire social circle to witness. I watched from my car parked 2 blocks away, unable to resist seeing this moment I'd engineered so carefully. They led Claire out in handcuffs, her designer clothes wrinkled from sleep, her face streaked with tears and mascara. She looked nothing like the woman who'd closed those curtains with such calculated cruelty. Aaron wasn't arrested, not yet, but the officers spent 4 hours inside searching through files and computers, documenting evidence of crimes I'd already reported. My phone rang as I watched. Aaron's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Mom. His voice was destroyed, barely human. Please, help us. I know we hurt you. I know what we did was unforgivable. But those are your grandchildren, your only grandchildren. Think about them. And there it was. The card he thought he still held. Aaron, I said calmly, I am thinking about them. I'm thinking about the $80,000 you stole from their future. I'm thinking about them growing up with parents who taught them that cruelty is acceptable and consequences are for other people. I'm thinking about how they deserve better than you. Mom, please, I'm not your mom anymore. Moms protect their children. Moms don't lock them outside to freeze to death in the snow. Whatever you've become, you're not my son. And I'm not your rescue plan. I hung up while he was still begging. And I almost laughed. Because for once in this entire nightmare, I held all the power. The power he'd thought I'd lost when I became old and inconvenient and easy to discard. He was wrong. And that mistake would cost him everything. The custody hearing happened in June. Claire's criminal trial still pending, but her parenting fitness now under judicial review. I sat in the courtroom wearing my best dress, my hands folded calmly in my lap, while lawyers argued about whether my son and his wife were fit to raise the children they'd brought into this world. The caseworker testified about unsafe conditions, about financial instability, about the domestic violence report I'd filed months earlier. Security footage played on a screen, showing Claire closing those curtains. Several people in the gallery gasped. The judge's face remained neutral. The gavel fell on a Wednesday afternoon in late June, and with it fell the last illusion of the family I'd once believed in. Temporary custody of Marcus and Maya Ward was granted to their grandmother, Helen Ward, pending further investigation into parental fitness and the resolution of ongoing criminal proceedings. Aaron sat with his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Claire was still in jail, unable to make bail after her parents had finally cut her off financially. The lawyer they'd hired with the last of their savings looked defeated, packing up his briefcase with the exhausted movements of someone who'd known this outcome was inevitable. I accepted the custody paperwork from the clerk, my hands steady despite the enormity of what had just happened. My grandchildren were safe now, protected from parents who'd proven they couldn't be trusted with the most precious gifts life had given them. As I walked out of the courthouse, the twins sleeping peacefully in their double stroller, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Not quite happiness, not yet forgiveness, but a sense of justice that felt like clean air filling my lungs after being trapped in a smoke-filled room. Aaron tried to follow me to my car, begging for one more chance, promising he'd changed. I kept walking. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. That winter, the first winter since the night they'd locked me out, I moved into a small house with a yard where the twins could play. Nothing fancy, just a simple 3-bedroom rental that felt more like home than their McMansion ever had. I stacked my own firewood that season, piling it carefully by the back door where I could reach it easily. The smell of smoke from my fireplace brought back memories I'd been afraid would haunt me forever, But they didn't. Not anymore. I wasn't the woman they'd abandoned to freeze in the snow. I wasn't the grateful victim who'd begged for scraps of affection from people who'd lost the right to call themselves family. I was the woman they'd accidentally forged when they'd tried to break me, tempered by cold and cruelty into something stronger than I'd ever been before. Marcus and Maya thrived in the warmth I'd created for them, their laughter filling rooms that had been empty for too long. Sometimes, late at night after I'd put them to bed, I'd stand by the window and watch snow fall. It didn't scare me anymore. Winter had taught me its secrets, shown me that survival wasn't about avoiding the cold, but learning to carry your own warmth inside you. I still had one final message left to send. The letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I found the courage to mail it. Plain white envelope, simple address, no return information because I didn't need or want a response. Inside was a single sheet of paper with words I'd written and rewritten until they captured exactly what I needed to say. Dear Aaron, you taught me that love without respect is cruelty in disguise. You showed me that family is something you build through actions, not something you inherit through blood. I survived your winter, the one you and Claire created when you decided an old woman's life was worth less than your convenience. Now it's your turn to survive the winter you brought upon yourself. I don't hate you. Hate requires energy I'd rather spend on the grandchildren you couldn't appreciate. But I will never forgive you, and I will never forget what you became when you thought no one was watching. The twins are safe, healthy, and loved. They ask about their daddy sometimes, and I show them photos of the man you used to be before you married someone who taught you that people are disposable. Maybe someday you'll become that person again. I hope you do, for your sake. But that journey is yours to make alone. I enclosed a photograph of Marcus and Maya in my garden, their faces bright with laughter, their hands full of dandelions they'd picked for me. Because revenge didn't end with their ruin. It began with my rebirth, and with giving those babies the childhood their parents had tried to steal from all of us. I dropped the letter in the mailbox on a sunny afternoon in August, 8 months after the night I'd nearly died. And I walked away from it feeling lighter than I had in years, carrying my own warmth with me into whatever came next.